Patman. Happy little games. Hello, my happy little gamers. Patman QC here, wanting to give big thanks to everyone who clicked on this video. I assumed a lot of you are here because you watched my history of Sega 32X video and wanted to see more of the games. If you haven't watched that video, then rush out to your nearest YouTube player and check it out. A lot of you were happy with the history video and wanted to see more of the games. So let's get this little show on the road because these are the games of the Sega 32X. The first game on our list of trusty but perhaps rusty Sega 32X games is Zaxxon's Motherbase 2000. Now just off the name alone, you would expect it to be part of the Zaxxon franchise, and while it does have a similar vantage point, the game started out life as something completely different. It was known simply as Mother in Japan and Europe, but Sega of America decided to tack on the Zaxxon name. The gameplay is more reminiscent of the Neo Geo Classic Viewpoint than anything else. However, Viewpoint used sprites, whereas this one uses very basic polygons. But to be honest, it doesn't look that great. This is an auto-scrolling game which is spread out over 8 diverse levels with a boss at the end of each one. You have to take out roadblocks, enemy robots, and aircraft as you try to make it to the end of each level. There are a number of power-ups, including being able to hijack enemy ships and using its resources to your advantage. It's a cool little feature being able to hop from enemy to enemy, just like my ex-girlfriend jumped from bed to bed with the frequency of a cheap ham radio. The graphics got a whole lot of flack when the game was first released, but honestly, they aren't that bad. They're just sort of there. The animation is fairly smooth, but once you get a lot of enemies on screen, there is quite a bit of slowdown. The music and sound effects are both average, but it does control decent. There is a 2-player head-to-head mode which does increase the life of the game. Having an Amiga in my teenage years, I was exposed not only to the pervert living down the street, but also the absolutely stellar game out of this world. Blackthorne is another cinematic platformer which also came out for the Super NES and DOS. The story is very convoluted for a game at that time, which literally takes up 3 full pages in the manual. The game is set on the planet Tool, which has existed for centuries without human knowledge. Its people were ruled by a single shaman who gets overthrown. A military captain known as Blackthorne sets out to kill the evil Sarlacc and reclaim his throne. Your weapon of choice is a shotgun, which seems like an odd choice considering the fantasy setting, but it does get the job done. This is an action platformer which consists of you running, jumping, climbing ladders, and throwing bombs. Littered throughout the various levels are prisoners chained to the walls who either give you hints, potions, or just grunts and groans. The graphics are very nice with realistic detailed sprites and lots of color, although everything is a bit dark, although considering the mood of the game, it's understandable. Unlike the 16-bit Super Nintendo version, this one uses pre-rendered 3D computer graphics for its sprites and also updates the backgrounds. The level layouts are really unique, and the 32X even gets an exclusive snowy mountain area. The audio was well done with various dark and creepy tunes to accompany the gameplay. The controls are a bit iffy with input lag happening at certain points with your character. The game is long, but thankfully they included a password feature. Mortal Kombat II was quite the sensation when it was released in the arcades, and the home versions were no exception. The Super Nintendo version was closer to the arcade game with its increased palette and enhanced audio when compared to the standard Sega Genesis. When the 32X version was released, all the problems that were found in the Genesis version were for the most part eliminated. The 32X version used an enhanced palette with a slightly higher resolution when compared to the Super Nintendo. The sound effects have also been enhanced, but unfortunately, the music uses the same soundtrack as found in the standard Sega Genesis version. Something that neither version had were the opening cinematics explaining what the heck was going on. The 32X restores these and also the game's endings. This version uses the same tight controls as found in the Genesis, and it feels fantastic with the 6-button pad. If you are a Mortal Kombat 2 connoisseur, then you should definitely check this out. Also, a few years ago, a hack was made of this game which fixed a few small bugs and improved the palette of the game to bring the colors just a little bit closer to the arcade game. It also fixed some of the music issues as well.
Finish him. Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
Since we are talking about arcade conversions, let's take a look at NBA Jam Tournament Edition, which was one of the best home versions to play back in the day. Of course, it's not quite as good as the PlayStation or Sega Saturn version, but there is no 25-second loading time in between each quarter, and it's leaps and bounds above the Sega Genesis port. The palette and detail of the sprites have been improved, and the characters now scale in size similar to the arcade game, just a bit more scaled back. The heads are a lot bigger.
That's what she said.
Making each player much more identifiable. There are a lot more voice samples, and they are crystal clear. The same tight controls as found in the Sega Genesis version are also present, making this another fantastic arcade conversion which requires 2 pieces of hardware to play.
Boom shakalaka! Intercepted! Heating up!
If you ever wondered what happened to Chuck Rock and his dung-dropping dinosaur friends, then wonder no more and fire up the game BC Racers. This is a spin-off of Chuck Rock which utilizes the same characters found in the original 2 games. Originally, the game was known as Chuck Racer and then Chuck Rally Rocky Racers before they finally changed it to the one we know and love today. Obviously, this is just a Mario Kart ripoff, but there is a small story which involves millionaire playboy caveman Millstone Rockefeller, who organizes a bike race where the winner receives the illustrious Balderdash bike. Some of the colorful cast of racers you will go up against include Jimi Hendrix, Brick Jagger, and Bob Hardley, so there is definitely an emphasis on various music artists. Each duo that you have to select have different attributes, which makes for a much more enjoyable game. The game was initially released on the Mega CD, which included full motion video clips and higher quality sound, but the load times were unbearable. This version looks pretty good with large detailed sprites and fairly smooth scrolling and animation. Unlike the original Mario Kart, where most of the game takes place on a flat plane with very little roadside objects, this game is littered all throughout with objects such as houses, volcanoes, and roadside signs. The game also offers a higher resolution and longer draw distances thanks to the increased power of the 32X. The sound effects and music are awful with dull repetitive music playing all throughout. The controls are adequate but not quite as tight as found in Mario Kart. There is a 2-player split screen mode which decreases the number of roadside objects just to keep the frame rate up. In early 1995, Motocross Championship was released. This title is quite obviously based on the sport of motocross, in which you have to race against 11 other opponents. The unique aspect of this is that during the race you can throw elbows like a madman or kick them similar to Road Rash, although Road Rash did it a whole lot better. You have your choice of 3 different bikes from the onset, and since this is motocross, the courses are extremely hilly, which sees your player sail through the air with the greatest of ease. You can even perform various stunts such as acrobatics, wheelies, and more. The game was plagued with problems, forcing developers Artec to bring the game to life on a single development kit. This is evident as soon as you start up the game. The 32-bit power must have taken a day off because this game is downright fugly. I can understand the roads and possibly roadside objects being a bit pixelated, but why on earth is the main character pixelated as well? This is 32-bit power, people. The engine sound effects aren't bad, but the music is very low-key and lethargic. The game has slippery controls, which doesn't make for a whole lot of fun when it comes to a racing title. This game did remind me of the old arcade game Enduro Racer, so that moves it up 1 notch in my book. Now, I've been known to play the links every now and then down at the local wacky mini golf course, which a lot of times turned into a big old family fight. However, when it comes to golf video games, I did enjoy playing them, starting back with the original leaderboard for the Commodore 64. When going over the not-so-vast library of 32X games, I was pleasantly surprised to see this mouthful of a golf game, Magazine 36 Great Holes, starring Fred Couples. This is a fun, easy pick-up-and-play game which, as the title suggests, lets you play 36 different holes. Therein lies one of the problems. 36 holes is equal to about 2 rounds of golf, and after playing it for a few hours, you have seen everything this game has to offer. However, what is there is a lot of fun, and there are a number of customization options upon starting up the title, such as changing your outfit, clubs, etc. There are a few different game modes, including skins, match play, tournament play, and more. One unique aspect of the game is that these supposedly 36 greatest holes have been taken from a number of different courses and are presented in random order. This really makes the game stand out, but it also hinders it due to there only being 36. The graphics look pretty nice with the use of digitized animation for the golfer. Aside from some intro music, there really isn't any during gameplay. There are a few voice samples from Mr. Couples himself, but there are so few in variety that they tend to get a bit annoying. There is a save feature and the ability to save 4 different replays. This is a fun little game, especially if you enjoy the wide world of golf. Yes, I know a lot of you will say that this game is just a Star Wars ripoff, but I thoroughly enjoyed Shadow Squadron. The game is an open world shooter which definitely takes inspiration from Sega's own Star Wars arcade. It takes place in the deepest, darkest regions of outer space, letting you choose between 2 different aircraft, each with different abilities. The first vehicle is the smaller blue ship, which is fast and has a cockpit view. The second ship is a large red behemoth with a larger field of vision and better weapons, but it's much slower. You're able to speed up and slow down, all while tracking enemy ships and bases. There is a 2-player mode with 1 player steering the ship and the other one shooting, which again is similar to the 2-player mode in Star Wars Arcade. The graphics look really good and the animation is still fairly smooth. The sound effects and music are also really good. This game definitely didn't get the attention it deserves, so give it a shot if you're curious. If you released a new system in the early to mid 1990s, you had to make sure to have at least 1 fighting game for users to enjoy. Unfortunately, the one 32X users were given was Brutal Unleashed Claws of Fury. The original game in the series was Brutal Paws of Fury and was released for a number of systems such as the Sega Genesis and Amiga. This is a one-on-one fighting game which sees the world's best martial artists, who just happen to be animals, invited to compete in a grueling tournament on Brutal Island. The game utilizes the 6-button pad on the 32X with controls set up similar to Street Fighter. This version, just like Street Fighter II Champion Edition, offers a number of updates over the original, such as faster speed and the option to play as the boss characters. The game did offer some interesting ideas. When you start the game, your character doesn't have any special moves at the start of the single player quest. You have to earn these moves by playing through the stages. There are a few problems with this though, as every time you earn a new move you get a password, and if you want to resume your game you have to re-enter the password. For some reason, when you continue your quest, your fighter has the moves you previously earned, but you have to start all over from the first stage. It makes no sense. The second problem is the butt-nasty controls. I can't imagine that they looked at the first game and thought to themselves, yeah, this is perfect, let's just speed up the gameplay. While the graphics are colorful and feature very smooth animation, everything moves way too fast and the AI is just a nightmare. On certain matches, the computer kept spamming the same move over and over, while the next match it doesn't do hardly anything, making for an easy win. The sound effects are your typical grunts and groans that you would find in an early 1990s fighter or 6 hours PA. post-Arby's. If the AI was leveled out, the game might have been a fun little fighter, but as it stands, it's best to avoid this wascally wabbit. To think that we didn't get an actual Sonic game on the 32X is amazing, but we did get Knuckles Chaotix. This is a spin-off from our beloved Blue Hedgehog, and although reviews were mixed, I thoroughly enjoyed it back in the day. The game started out life as an engine test entitled Sonic Crackers on the Sega Genesis. This saw Sonic and Tails joined by an elastic band of energy. The game was going to be a launch title for the Sega Saturn, but since Sega needed new 32X games, they decided to downsize it and release it for this system instead. The gameplay is very similar to the earlier Sonic games, but this time you are tethered to either a second player or the computer. The tether behaves like a standard rubber band, and you have to master this technique to maneuver through the various stages. Thankfully, there is a tutorial at the beginning showing you exactly how to play the game. It's a pretty cool innovation that introduces new physics to play with. There are a number of different characters to choose from, each one having different abilities. There are 6 levels called attractions, each one divided into 5 acts. The bonus stages use the scaling power of the 32X to create an almost hypnotic level that would feel right at home on the Sega Saturn. The graphics are what you would expect from a standard Sonic title, only with the colors cranked up to 11. There is no slowdown, with Knuckles just as speedy as good old Sonic. It's not all rainbows and lollipops though, as the game sometimes feels just a bit off. Everything feels just a bit unfinished, and there is even some repetition going on in the early stages. The music and sound effects are also excellent and fit in perfectly with the rest of Sonic's early titles. As it stands, it's a pretty good game, but with just a little bit more fine-tuning, it could have been an absolute classic. T-Mek debuted in the arcades in 1994, with the 32X version releasing in 1995. This game is set in the future, giving the player control over a hover tank as you try to eliminate the T-Mek Corporation by destroying their rivals. The game is essentially an updated take on the classic Atari game Battlezone, mixed in with the network play of Doom. You could actually have several cabinets linked together for multiplayer tank deathmatches. The arcade game, if you could find it along with a few friends to play, was a lot of fun, which is something the 32X version is not. Right off the bat, there is no way to link the home versions together, so network play is out, although there is a split screen option available. The split screen mode doesn't work all that well, as it lowers the frame rate and, of course, the obligatory screen watching technique, seeing exactly what your opponent is up to. While the arcade game features smooth animation, the 32X version is an ugly pixelated mess, especially the closer to the objects that you get. The tanks used digitized photos to represent them, similar to Mortal Kombat, but it just doesn't work, especially in this version. From a distance, they look adequate, but when you are directly next to one, your screen is covered in pixels amundo. The sound effects and music are okay, along with the controls. This game could have been a whole lot better, and I would have loved to have seen this come out for the Saturn or PlayStation.
alert.
The Sega 32X even received a version of the arcade hit Primal Rage. This is a one-on-one fighter that features various prehistoric creatures. The arcade game was unique in a couple of different ways in that it used stop-motion animation for all the various dinosaurs. Instead of ripping off the control scheme of Street Fighter II, it totally changed the gameplay and not for the better in my opinion. While you do have quick responsive controls of your dinosaur, to perform your moves you have to hold the button combination down first and then do the joystick motion. Totally bass-ackwards when compared to Street Fighter. However, if you play it for any length of time, you eventually do get used to it. The game features special moves, combos, and finishing moves. When the game was released on the 16-bit platforms, the Super Nintendo version was censored. The Genesis and 32X version features everything from the arcade, including a little bit of urination domination thanks to the acidic piss from Chaos. This version does feature better colors and animation. The 32X is only in charge of the character models, leaving the Genesis to handle the background graphics. The sound effects and music have also been improved with nice, clear samples being used. One thing of note is that the Genesis and 32X versions are based off of the 1.7 revision of the arcade game, while all other conversions use the updated 2.3 revision. What that means is, in the 32X version you're missing certain combos, special moves, and character balance. So if you've ever been curious if dinosaurs have to stand up to go pee-pee, you might want to check this game out. As I mentioned in my original History of 32X video, Doom had a number of problems. Yes, it was impressive to see it running on a home console at the time, but it was missing a lot of things. Doom 32X Resurrection was released by the D32XR team and features a number of improvements. They referenced the original Jaguar Doom source code in order to see what was missing from the 32X version, and what they were able to achieve is amazing. For starters, the frame rate is very smooth and all of the missing levels have been implemented. The sound effects and music have been greatly improved with a number of different options. There is network support via the Zero Tolerance link cable, but you also have split-screen co-op and deathmatch modes. There is also support for the standard Sega Genesis 3-button and 6-button pad as well as the Sega mouse. We also get anamorphic widescreen support and 8 different save slots. The newest version is 2.0 and it's utterly fantastic, so major kudos to everyone involved. The 32X didn't have a huge library of games with just over 40 titles released. If you count my original video, I think so far I've covered just over half of the library. I was pleasantly surprised with some of these titles, and it was fun revisiting ones that I used to play back in the day. If you would like to see more from this underutilized Sega add-on, let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. If you would like to contribute but not sign up for my Patreon, you can always click the donate button up above. Thanks everyone for watching.